At the time this script is being written, Attack on Titan's original manga run has been over for almost 4 years, and the anime adaptation for a little over a year. The series is one of the most popular manga/anime franchises ever, being known as an anime for people that hated typical anime tropes, and went strong from beginning to ending despite delays in the case of the anime adaptation. Despite all of this positive momentum, the ending has been largely poorly received, with some even comparing the ending to Season 8 of Game of Thrones, or in other words, a clusterfuck of biblical proportions. While I hope it's just a vocal minority I've misconstrued as a consensus, a lot of people were really angry, with Hajime Isayama, the mangaka, even issuing an apology for how people received the ending. I fundamentally disagree with many of the criticisms people have offered of the ending, and I think many of them come from people being too media literate to understand how themes work, or being other kinds of dumb. Some of this is unfortunately cached in culture war bullshit because of the impact Eren Yeager's had on viewers, so that'll be sifted through as well, though hopefully as minimally as possible. I'll first summarize why I like how the series concluded, and then address a few of the top criticisms of how the ending was written. There will be, of course, heavy spoilers for the story, but if you haven't figured that out already, I'm shocked because lobotomies fell out of fashion decades ago. So, forgive me, but I will assume you've consumed the story at this point, and if you haven't, go forward at your own risk. Without further ado, let's go. Part 1. The ending is great, actually. To make a long story short, very literally, Attack on Titan is a story about cycles of violence, why we perpetuate them, and why they're bad. The lore of the series is a little convoluted, and dispensed to the viewer in a very roundabout way, but here's the gist. Thousands of years ago, a girl named Ymir acquired Titan abilities by making contact with a magic Jesus centipede. Yeah, no, seriously. She was a slave of a guy known as Fritz, who exploited her and her powers to make his tribe of people, known as the Eldians, the masters of the world. Upon her death, the keys to these powers were passed on to her descendants, and ultimately used to perpetuate an imperialist system that oppressed anyone who was an Eldian. Eventually, one of the subjugated nations, known as Marley, was able to swing some of the holders of these Titan powers to their side, and Eldia fell out of power. However, instead of restoring freedom to the world and ending violence, Marley instead just did the same thing, calling Eldians devils and making them wear armbands reminiscent of the Holocaust, despite using them for their conquests, as that specific race of people were the only ones who could use the Titan powers. The former king of the Eldian Empire takes some of his people to a little island and builds walls made of giant colossal titans, with the explicit threat that while he's decided to renounce war, if aggression is made upon his people who remain within the walls, then the Wall Titans will advance from the island and literally wipe out the rest of humanity in a sort of mutually assured destruction type deal. Through 4 pretty great seasons of television, it's revealed that 2 key characters have the keys to the nukes, metaphorically speaking. The brothers Jaeger, our main character Eren, and Zeke, Monkey Man Extraordinaire. Most of our quote-unquote good guys want to harness the power of that rumbling only as a deterrent, and Zeke wants to basically euthanize all Eldians to prevent future usage of the Titan powers for evil, but Eren decides that he will in fact press the red button and destroy the rest of humanity, using the justification that it's basically self-defense to destroy a world that sees his race as devils. A mix of people who've served as protagonists and antagonists team up to stop Eren. He dies, the Titan ability no longer exists, and the world enters an uneasy post-bellum period in a world no longer dictated by bullshit anime god powers. Your reception of the ending really comes down to how you understand Eren's ideology. In the early seasons, before he even knows that there is an outside world to fight, his internal motivation is freedom. He argues that he is owed freedom because of the simple fact that he was born in the first place, and through his natural rights as an living human, he is justified in the pursuit of freedom and survival at all costs. Upon finding the outside world, he vows to keep fighting until he and his people can be totally free, with the sort of logical conclusion to this being that if he wipes everybody else out, then by definition, there's no one to oppress his people. Of course, conveniently forgetting that they, in fact, previously overthrew a government consisting of those same people because they were being oppressive. He's aided in this thinking by the fact that he can sorta see the future, with the unique ability of his Titan being that it can transmit memories from the future backwards in time. Don't think about it too hard, I swear to God, please don't. He has already seen the rumbling, the in-universe name for the rest of humanity being wiped out, and resigns himself to believing that he has to carry it out. The man whose motto up to this point had literally been, fight, fight, has given up the hope for at least a semi-peaceful solution to this literal race war and decided to apply Occam's razor, genocide style. While our main character just becoming an instrument of genocide itself isn't profound, the mental state we see from Eren after he's died, don't worry about it, really reveals what the point is. Regardless of how that future shit works, in doing the rumbling, he did stop fighting in a metaphorical sense, stopping his previously ongoing fight for freedom once and for all. I have no idea how causality or fate works in this universe any more so than in real life. Maybe him trying to prevent the rumbling would have still resulted in it happening like a Greek tragedy, but he did stop fighting fate nonetheless. That fight is what we're all faced with in life from an absurdist perspective. Even though we all know that the end point of our lives is death, we keep on doing it because the fight is the only thing that matters. If you truly believe that life is solely defined by the end point, then you really shouldn't be watching this because you would have killed yourself already. This is all Albert Camus' philosophy of absurdism for dummies, but incredibly applicable in this scenario. Knowing this, we return to Eren and his little post-mortem discussion with Armin. He cries at what he felt he had to do, and honestly comes off as kind of pathetic. But that is the lesson. Anyone who commits genocide in real life is probably pathetic. Fascists are usually internally broken people who mask their own inner inadequacies with posturing. They're deeply broken, fucked up people, and so is Eren. Eren doesn't even believe in the various racial ideologies present in the world, he just wants a way out. His version of the rumbling becomes an extended act of suicide by cop that forces his friends to kill him. Regardless of whether it was inevitable, his decision to treat it as such breaks him, just as it breaks anyone in real life who thinks that the inevitability of death somehow renders their lives meaningless. To quote a Giga Chad from the same series, "It's all meaningless, no matter what dreams or hopes you had, no matter how blessed a life you've lived. It's all the same if you're shattered by rocks. Everyone will die someday." Does that mean life is meaningless? Was there even any meaning in our being bored? Would you say that to our fallen comrades? Their lives? Were they meaningless? No, they weren't. It's us who give meaning to our comrades' lives. The brave fallen, the anguished fallen. The ones who will remember them are us, the living. We die trusting the living who follow to find meaning in our lives. The theme of that speech is part of why I think the ending is brilliant. It criticizes the nihilistic doomer ideology of Eren by showing how unhappy and sad he's become after the fact. The stone-cold facade we saw from him earlier was in fact a facade. He was not in fact an edgy bad boy with some sort of utilitarian message that you should emulate. He was the opposite. That's one of the reasons, of course, why it was so poorly received. Because certain subsections of the fanbase had projected themselves onto Eren, because honestly, isn't it tempting? He's a badass with a lot of positive qualities for a lot of the series, and his solution to the problem of human conflict is as simple as it is flawed. Eren sought to somehow free himself from the cycle of violence via violence, and what do you know? He ended up dead violently, taking millions if not billions of the innocent with him. Violent outbursts are a popular option for isolated, nihilistic people, and I would hazard to guess anyone who thought Eren was right or cool in committing genocide is probably a little fucked up themselves. The solution is never to resign yourself, it's to die fighting, metaphorically speaking. For freedom, for hope, for justice, for love. Eren, throughout the story, had received a ton of affection from Mikasa, and stonewalled her in lieu of being a stoic soldier, and in the end he laments the fact that he never got to be with her, uttering the now famous rant. No, I don't want that. Mikasa finding another man? I want her to think about me and no one else for the rest of her life. Even after I die, I want her to be hung up on me for a while. 10 years at least. If this struck a chord with you, then it's probably because you felt like you were Eren, and don't like the mirror being turned on you. He never embraced Mikasa in life, and in death wishes he could. Once again, it is not cool to be some detached Machiavellian mastermind. It is in fact quite fucked up. For other criticisms of the same idea, see Tywin Lannister's fucked up psyche. We, speaking for the autists in the room, all secretly want to be Ryan Gosling bleeding out in snow because it's sort of romantic as an idea, but it is not pleasant to actually live. It is bad. Being lonely is bad. If you feel this way, get help. Another reason I love Attack on Titan's ending is the philosophy of Zeke Yeager. Too long didn't read, he's a self-hating Eldian who resents the fact that he was born in the first place, who resolved to make sure no one else with his cursed blood is ever born. His solution to the problems of the story are also an act of extended suicide, wanting to use the powers of the Titans to make sure no one with his tainted devil blood is ever born again. If people like this video, then maybe I'll make an entire additional video about his character, but in summary, whereas Eren failed to stop externalizing his inner demons, Zeke finally decides that life is in fact beautiful just before sacrificing himself for the world. My brother, who's a hell of a lot smarter than me, once said that the ending of your story is your authorial statement on the resolution of the theme. The actual final scenes before a flash forward are the surviving important characters bravely sailing towards paradise as diplomats, as the island has militarized into a fascist regime post-rumbling. They have no idea how they'll be received, but still resolved to go forward into the future in good faith, because that's the only way humanity will ever move forward. It's not sexy, but in the constant struggle that is the cycle of violence, someone has to take the risk and be vulnerable. All of human conflict can be basically summed up as the prisoner's dilemma, where it makes logical sense to always give the other the benefit of the doubt for mutual gain. But because we're greedy apes fighting on a big ball, we almost always choose to condemn each other as a knee-jerk reaction. We're already fated to either extinction or utopia, so we might as well extend our hands to the others reaching for a better world, even if it's in vain. That's Isayama's answer to the theme, and I find it to be pretty resonant. For the next part, I'll address some common criticisms I've seen of the ending, and address them, but it'll obviously be less verbose than the previous part. The ending is fatalistic. This take I've never really understood. Did you want Isayama to give you the blueprint for permanently ending human conflict? He is but one mortal man who knows how to tell a good yarn and has varying levels of drawing talent. World peace isn't achieved in the end because we just don't know how to do that yet. But most of the deaths were because Eren resigned himself to the fate he saw from the future. It's only fatalistic if you're like Eren and resign yourself to the cycle of violence instead of reaching for hope no matter how fleeting or minuscule it may seem at any given moment. I also found it to be somewhat hopeful in that instead of wanting revenge, the survivors of the rumbling, the actual victims, send a peace envoy to paradise, the ostensible perpetrators, instead of trying to muster whatever forces they have left into a final battle. That's pretty fucking hopeful compared to the rest of the story, in that finally, one side is willing to sue for peace. Plus, in the flash forward of old Mikasa, we can assume some sort of peace was achieved if she got to return to paradise to raise a family. Altogether, just a take I don't agree with. The ending endorses fascism. Attack on Titan has had an understandable association with fascist themes for a large part of its run. With many levying claims that it harbored nationalist sympathies, that's nothing new. It does depict fascist governments, racism, and ethnic cleansings. Dear God, there's no way this video is ever going to be monetized. Jesus Christ. However, that in no way means that it supports these ideas any more than a movie about a serial killer encourages murder. The depiction of a subject does not equal endorsement. The arc of Gabby in Season 4, overcoming her hatred, is a really poignant condemnation of the racism, self-hatred, and brainwashing that young people can fall into. Racism bad is a pretty recurrent theme of especially the 4th season, and if you can't understand that, then you're fucking brain dead. It also uses Holocaust-adjacent imagery later on in the show as well to show that the Liberio internment zone is, wait for it, bad. I am a Jewish man, and I think this is a pretty solid fictional parallel. The idea that the ending specifically is somehow fascist is found in how Eldia becomes a fascist state, but nowhere is this suggested to be good. Our characters at the end are going to hopefully de-escalate tensions with this state because it is bad. The militarism of the world seems kind of cool in the earlier seasons, and then becomes more visibly fucked up, because that's what the story's doing as a deconstruction. I genuinely don't understand how you could read or watch the entire story and come away thinking that endorses fascism. If you do so, please cease breathing air, it leaves more for the rest of us. Eren is redeemed too easily. The idea is sort of understandable, but only if you're dumb enough to take a clearly fucked up character's words at face value, but I will note that there's a difference between the anime and the manga. During Eren and Armin's conversation, Eren talks about how his whole plan was for them to stop him and kill him. He has just killed the majority of humanity, and his justification is basically just, don't worry guys, I wasn't going to kill all of humanity beyond the walls, I was only going to kill most of it before you stopped me. That's fucking insane. You should not accept this justification from a crazy person. But there is also the problem of the original Armin response, which reads, "Thank you for turning yourself into a mass murderer for our own sake. I swear I won't let your mistake go in vain." Now, I definitely understand that this version might imply that we the viewers are just supposed to accept this, but this is Armin after all. Armin, his best friend and longtime confidant, probably isn't going to tear him a new one in their last ever conversation before Eren dies, because he's emotionally conflicted, all sorts of traumatized, and once again, it's his best friend. I will concede, however, that the anime version is far better, as Armin berates Eren for how fucking stupid his plan was. While I don't think the manga ending dialogue ruins the entire story or anything, Armin talking this way more readily clarifies the themes and makes the ending that much better. This is pretty much the sole point I'll concede, but it doesn't seem to be the core of badness that people who dislike the ending are pointing to. To quote an actual Reddit comment about this dialogue change, damage control doesn't fix the hot mess of Eren's logic being bullshit from the beginning, it just means we have one less cringe moment. I really think the original manga line is only awful if it's symptomatic of a larger problem, one that these people see and I just don't. Because it's been so well told by this point in the story, I give the narrative leeway to assume that just because manga Armin accepts Eren, that we the viewers are not necessarily meant to agree with him, and then the anime makes it even more clear. Long story short, I don't think it's bad, and the anime version really makes the scene a masterpiece. Eren's plan was terrible. Yes it was. And the aforementioned addition of Armin poking holes in his logic in the anime makes that clear. But even in the original manga, I'm not sure if we're supposed to accept the justification of this pathetic man who, I remind you, is crying over Mikasa finding another man and talking about how he would have done it even if there was no one to stop him. He literally says in the manga, "I don't know why, but I wanted to do that very badly." His solution to the angst that seeing memories of the future rumbling causes is to just wreck everything and die. And given the fact that we see Eren from the future change the past, who's to say that it was fated in the laws of this universe? This was a bad plan because it was a knee-jerk reaction by an idiot. A garden-variety idiot, as Eren calls himself in the anime. I think within the context of all the fucked up shit he's seen, Eren's demeanor change between seasons 3 and 4 also makes a lot of sense, for reasons I've already covered about how that Terminator rumbling Eren is a man who's given up. In other words, it's all consistent with other information we've learned about his motivations. Ymir and Fritz. It's said in the ending of Attack on Titan by Mikasa that in the end, Ymir truly loved Fritz even though she did want freedom. This is seen by some as rightfully fucked up, seeing as their relationship was one of rape, enslavement, and exploitation. I agree that that's fucked up, that's blatantly fucking obvious, but I once again see this as a case where the narrative is not necessarily saying that their quote-unquote love is or was a good thing. Depiction once again does not equal endorsement, and if you think otherwise, go fuck yourself, yada yada yada. It's incredibly sad that Ymir was trapped in the path serving Eldians for thousands of years, just as it's sad that humanity itself is trapped in a cycle of violence. Ymir and her Stockholm Syndrome could be seen as a metaphor for humanity's desire to commit violence, colonialism, genocide, etc., even if it hurts us as a whole. The fact that Ymir still wanted to be free deep down I even see as an admission that it was bad for her, despite her love. That she knew the relationship deep down was toxic, and she wanted out, she just couldn't be the one to do it. Mikasa, however, was strong enough to sever her toxic relationship, figuratively and literally, crash, and while no one could shame Ymir for not being able to do so the same, she ultimately is the thematic foil to her. Conclusion. Let's revisit my previous quotation that how you end your story defies your authorial statement on the central themes. In the underrated 1998 movie Buffalo 66, Billy Brown, despite living a traumatized life where he's been constantly victimized, puts aside his plan of assassinating an otherwise innocent man he's projected the root of his problems onto, in lieu of deciding to go forward and build on what little joy he's found, fostering his future instead of raising the past. Writer and director Vincent Gallo here is suggesting that no matter what one's trauma is, you ultimately have a choice to decide on how to respond to it. In The Sopranos, the fade to black ending suggests that no matter whether Tony is killed or not, he might as well be dead, due to how royally fucked his life is due to being a member of the Mafia. Series creator David Chase is saying that one cannot expect to somehow live happily or get an otherwise good ending if their life has been involved with so many contradictions and unanswered for sins. You're smart people, you get this. This is basic morality play stuff. Attack on Titan tackles themes of nihilism and human conflict, and ends with our heroes narrowly stopping an apocalypse before acting as envoys of peace. It suggests that no matter how futile the attempt to end all conflict may be, it's worth it, in the end, to make the attempt. Not making the attempt to stop it just makes you end up like Eren. Regardless of how causality works in this universe and whether Eren was 100% fated to do the rumbling, his resignation towards doing so is a source, if not the source, of his misery, and he dies unhappy. It suggests that surrendering yourself to the cruelty of the world isn't an appropriate response, and ties into a core theme of the series. We're all going to go down eventually, so let's all go down swinging. Life is cruel, but also beautiful. We're all going to die, so let's die happy. It doesn't matter how correct in an objective way a more detached, fatalistic outlook might be, when one would waste what little life they have. That base and humanity-pilled rhetoric is at the core of Attack on Titan's ending, and one of the reasons why I find it so thematically pleasing. Any other ending would strike me as disingenuous unless our author truly was that detached and fucked up, and our man Isayama seems to be living life to the fullest, hanging out with Mighty Mouse and enjoying a well-deserved break. That is what the ending of one of my favorite stories ever told says, and I am more than okay with it.